there folks, welcome to the channel. I hope you're having a great day. In today's freeze drying video, we are going to be tackling the Jolly Rancher. That's right, the Jolly Rancher can be a little tricky when it comes to freeze drying, so be sure to stick around to the very end. I'm going to share with you all of the tips and tricks that I know so that you can turn this hard candy into a crunchy, crispy, confectionery creation. And before we start, let me just say that I have made a few alterations to the shelf system with our Stay Fresh freeze jar. We've already made a video explaining how to do those alterations, and I'll put a video suggestion for it right about here. But basically, we created a hot box specifically for candies like, you know, Werther's Originals, Jolly Ranchers, things like that. It's absolutely beautiful. And you don't need to Stay Fresh in order to make these alterations. You could do it with the Blue Alpine. You could do it with the Harvest Right. All you're basically doing is creating a couple panels for insulation so that the heat stays inside of that area while the rest of the chamber cools down. And you're going to see it is absolutely brilliant and radically speeds up the time that it takes to make, you know, candies like Jolly Ranchers. All right, let's get started.
All right, let's talk about Jolly Ranchers. The first thing you got to decide is how big do you want your piece. You could leave this whole and freeze dry it like that. Only problem is that it's going to puff up into a relatively large candy that may be pretty fragile. And so my suggestion here would be to cut your Jolly Rancher into slightly smaller pieces. It's going to produce a better product. And then when it comes to cutting the candy, you can either unwrap it, like I'm doing here, or you can leave it in its wrapper, and either way is fine, it doesn't matter. And then there's the tool we're going to use to cut it. In this particular case, I like to use a very robust knife. I certainly wouldn't use a Japanese knife or something thin or fragile. Use a very heavy-duty knife, and then if you're going to use a knife, cut towards the very heel, so the very back of the knife where the blade tends to be the thickest. You could also use heavy-duty kitchen shears. That works as well. I've even seen examples where people use, you know, quail egg cutters to cut the Jolly Ranchers, and that seems to work fine as well. Should you leave the plastic on during the freeze drying process? I personally don't. We are going to be preheating the trays, getting that temperature up to 135, 145, and so for me, I don't like to keep the plastic on while the Jolly Ranchers are freeze drying. All right, so far so good. Cut your Jolly Ranchers into whatever size you want. Typically, I'll do thirds, halves, or even 2/3. And I find that to be the best size. Like I said, you can keep them whole if you want, but they do tend to be a little more fragile and a little more complicated to store. One thing I will say is that once you remove the wrapper on your Jolly Ranchers, don't place the unwrapped Jolly Ranchers into a large bowl because they have a tendency to stick together, especially as the temperature increases and become difficult to work with. Keep them separate. At this point, we've got our cut Jolly Ranchers, and we're just going to go ahead and place them on a tray. You don't want them too close because they will expand. In this case, 3 across is fine. If they're a little bit smaller, you could probably go 4 across. And now that we have one tray, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest. Let's get our Stay Fresh freeze dryer set up. I'm going to be using the 4-tray shelf system for these Jolly Ranchers because they do have a tendency to puff up a little bit, and we want to make sure that we have the clearance. And this is where you're going to start to see the modifications. Notice here at the bottom, I've got an extra thick layer of insulation. So we have 3 rows of insulation here at the bottom. I basically added 2 layers. As far as the top goes, it's also relatively thick, as opposed to the 1 layer that the Stay Fresh comes with. Mine is now 2. So we've got 2 layers on the top, 3 layers on the bottom, and let's go ahead and put our side panel in. We've got a double-walled panel of insulation on the right-hand side, and then we're going to do the same thing on the left-hand side, basically a double-walled panel going in. All right, and now what we've created is a hot box for our shelf system. Now, this particular modification is only going to be used for candy. You'll never really use this if you're going to be freeze drying regular food, because with regular food, you need the moisture to escape. With candy, it's not so important. Reattach the seal, and let me show you what the settings are going to look like for this particular project. We are going to be preheating the trays, and we can do that in the functions mode. So now that we're in functions, let's turn the compressor on. And we want the trap temperature, the temperature of the drum, to be at least at -20 before we start the preheating cycle. So a few minutes later, our trap temperature is at -40, and we are now good to go to continue the process. So let's press the box next to TS, right here on the right-hand side, and that allows us to change the temperature of the shelves. 135 Fahrenheit is what I'm shooting for in this project. And then to activate it, you can either press TS or you can press that heater on button. Pressing the heater on button gets it to temperature a lot faster, but when you get close, you still have to press the TS so that the freeze dryer will hold the shelf temperature at 135. While it's preheating, we're going to insert our Jolly Ranchers. So this is going in when the shelf temperature is at currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And so our Jolly Ranchers are going to be preheating with the shelves. I'm pushing everything in, make sure it's as far back as it goes. Looking good. Let's close it down. Okay, it looks like we are now close to 135. And like I said earlier, we now need to press the TS button so that the shelf temperature will stay at whatever we set it at. In this case, it's 135. See where it says 0 minutes? That's just the timer letting you know how long your freeze dryer has been preheating at your set temperature. For Jolly Ranchers, we're going to start with about a 5-minute preheat. It's not going to take very long. And there we go. 5 minutes have passed. We've been at 135. And we're going to open up our freeze dryer so that you could see what to look for so that you know whether it's time to continue. Notice the condition of my Jolly Ranchers. They are not melted, but they are incredibly soft. When I push them with my finger, I can squish them down almost to flat discs. Do you see that? So I don't want the Jolly Rancher to be completely melted. I want it to be soft. Let me just grab this one piece right here so that you can see maybe a little bit better what we're looking for. You can squeeze it down almost like taffy. There we go. Looks great. Let's look at the bottom shelf. Sometimes the bottom shelf does take a minute to catch up, but with that heat box, it looks like everything is heating relatively even. Beautiful. Okay, now that they are nice and soft, we're going to close it down. Let's go back to the menu, and we need to activate the rest of the functions. So we're going to turn the pump on. Remember, this is all manual, and then we're going to open the valve. About 10 minutes have passed. We've got a beautiful rise from our Jolly Ranchers, and what I want to do here is I want to manually increase the temperature inside the chamber. The reason I like to do that is because if you start with an increased temperature, you run the risk of softening your Jolly Ranchers too much. So that's why I start at 135. But after about 10 minutes of being under vacuum, I like to raise the temperature another 10 degrees. And let me show you what that looks like. And first of all, let me apologize for the quality. I didn't realize it was so blurry when I filmed this. But all I did was click the little box next to TS, and I typed in 145 and hit enter, and then the system is going to automatically increase the shelf temperature to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. And what that's going to do is just help soften up the inside even more, get a little bit more expansion, and you can do all of this with the Stay Fresh, when you're working in manual mode. Here's a before and after. I don't know if you can see the difference. Definitely beautiful rise on those Jolly Ranchers. Here's a bit of a closer look. Beautiful looking Jolly Ranchers. What we're looking for is something that's not too airy, that immediately just breaks apart when you hold it, but still has a bit of a body to it with a nice pop, and that's what we've got. So let's now undo the entire process by clicking everything in reverse. Close the valve, turn off the pump, turn off the heater, and then turn off the compressor, at which point we will let the air into our system, and our freeze drying cycle is finished. And this is what our Jolly Ranchers look like coming out. Let's take a closer look here on the table. Very pleased with the way these came out. Now we have everything from 1/3 size, half size, and 2/3 size here in front of us. I personally find that entire Jolly Ranchers tend to puff up too much, and they do become relatively fragile, making them difficult to store. You don't want them to crumble all to pieces. These are all 2/3 sizes. That's a half. This one right here, also a half. So the goal of making freeze-dried Jolly Ranchers is to get them to puff up just enough to where they still have some structural integrity. You don't want them to puff up so much that the minute you grab them, they just crumble. And I think these right here look just about perfect. Let's grab this one right here. Oh, that looks great. Let's give it a taste.
Our freeze-dried Jolly Ranchers are done. Check that out. Looks absolutely beautiful. Very airy, puffed up nicely. This piece was a half piece. This was a 1/3 piece, just to kind of give you an example. Size really doesn't matter in this particular case. It's a personal preference. I will say, though, that the freeze-dried version of this candy is incredibly hygroscopic, and so You know, if it's raining outside or if you live in a very humid environment, you've got about 10 or 15 minutes before you lose that crispy crunchiness. So from the freeze dryer, try to get it into whatever bag or storage container that you're going to get it into. Make sure it's airtight. Put a couple moisture absorbers for extra protection. Let's go ahead and give this one a bite and see how we did. That is nice. Very concentrated flavor. Super crispy, super crunchy. Not a big fan of regular Jolly Ranchers, but this I'm actually not hating. Let's try the grape. That's so strange. It has like the texture of a cheese puff that just melts in your mouth with this blast of Jolly Rancher flavor. That's so wild. I don't know if I'll ever get used to that radical change that happens in the freeze dryer where you go from one state to a different. Freeze-dried Jolly Ranchers. I kind of like it. And as you saw in this video, the process didn't take very long, so you could do a whole bunch of them pretty quick. The trick, though, for us was to create that hot box around the shelf system. If you don't have a hot box, your process may take a little bit longer. You can speed up the process by doing, you know, a little preheating in your oven. But the trick here is to make sure that you get that Jolly Rancher nice and soft before the vacuum kicks on. That's going to make it puffy, make that bite nice and crispy. All right, folks, there you have it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And if there's anything that you'd like to see me freeze dry in the future, drop me that comment as well. If you'd like more information on the Stay Fresh freeze dryer that we used in today's video, I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. And we just started a group on Facebook for people with Stay Fresh freeze dryers or people looking to learn a little bit more about the Stay Fresh freeze dryer. I'll put a link to that group in the description box below. You can learn from other people's experience, ask questions, all that great stuff. It's an amazing group. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell for more freeze drying content. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.